focus on tomorrow. Emergency Response Team. We have dedicated team with on-time response. Don't leave your future at the hands of change. Our troops never compromise. For your safety and your assets, choose King's Trooper Security Agency. The power to security.
This is SMNI News Channel. Truth that matters.
Good evening. You're watching SMNI. Welcome to Business and Politics. I'm your host, Dante Klinkam. Tonight, our guest is Mr. Jose Maria Policarpio, or as his friends call him, Toots. He's the Executive Director at the Philippine Educational Publishers Association, or PEPA, and he sits on the Board of Trustees of the Book Development Association of the Philippines, or BDAP. His main areas of focus are publishing, education technologies, and book distribution. You could say that he's an expert in book publishing, having served for 25 years as Senior Management Executive with some of the top educational publishing houses in the country. As his background suggests, we'll ask him about reading, which many say is the prescription for the learning poverty experienced by young Filipinos today. We'll also inquire about the state of the publishing industry as it tries to recover from the economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. We will ask Mr. Policarpio, how can we promote reading to young Filipinos, and what role can the Philippine publishers play in preparing them for the future? Toots? Toots, welcome to Business and Politics. Thank you for making time.
Hey, Klink, it's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Good to see you. I regret that we weren't able to play golf over the holidays. Injury reasons. But anyway.
It's okay. You can always play golf anytime.
I'm thankful that you made the time today because the previous week we had Doris Ferrer talking about education. And of course, related to that, is this issue that we've been hearing about for a long time now, which is the learning poverty experienced by Filipino learners, which the World Bank alerted us to. But of course, this is not new, right? The problems in education have been around for a while. And one of the recommendations that we've been hearing is to encourage our young children to read. What's the issue? I mean, this is not a new solution that we've been hearing to this problem, but from your perspective, having worked in the industry for a long time, what are your personal views and observations? What is the problem?
Okay, well, it's like you said, it's an age-old concern ever since. When we started, even in our generation or even the generation before us, the thing is, our schools actually need to teach the love for reading.
Okay.
I mean, at the very basic level, because that's where it all starts. That's where it
Okay.
all begins. I mean, of course, it's good that, I mean, you can teach them the sciences, you can teach them mathematics and all the other stuff. But at the very core of this will be the love of learning
Okay.
and the love of reading. I think these two can be interchanged, no? And, well, as they always say, back to the basics, man.
Right,
I mean,
right.
The way to instill love for reading, love for learning is, you expose the children at a very young age to all of these really nice and interesting reading materials.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, big picture books and,
Right.
big letters and
Right.
fun stuff. And,
Right.
and when their interest is picked,
Right.
then they start, and it's an enjoyable thing for them,
Right.
even among their peers,
Right.
and among the parents and the teachers. It becomes a very enjoyable activity to the point that they'd be actually looking forward to
Right.
to reading, and that's the whole objective of learning, right?
Right.
For you to be curious enough, for you to enjoy and ask questions
Yeah.
and find out things and discover new things. That at the very core is I think what we all want our children to have.
As you said, it's a simple thing. It sounds simple, and yet the implications are,
Oh,
are,
yes.
are quite serious because, and you may want to validate this because I've read somewhere that it can affect your not only your performance in school, but perhaps also your success in your career after school, and maybe it can affect your ability to earn a desirable income. Is that true, or have you heard something similar?
Well, obviously, evidence points out that I mean, the most well-read people,
Okay.
they're generally more interesting.
Okay.
They're more they can carry good conversations,
Right.
and they can relate better with people. And I think those are the basic soft qualities
Right.
that you need when you grow up as an adult.
Right.
To be more productive, to be more,
Okay.
to be able to relate well with other people. And
Okay.
yeah, it helps a lot. Of course, it's not a surefire thing.
Sure.
Obviously, but it does help a lot. Being well-read is a very big plus,
Right.
as it were, in your development as a person.
Right. I've heard some educators say, I mean, as you know, I have a young daughter, and as a parent, you probably have encountered this too. I'm a little bit bothered by, some educators asking me, how do we get the young kids to read, given they have access now to gadgets and, and from that, maybe the internet that are so alluring, right? How do we make reading fun or attractive to young people? I mean, from a business standpoint, I suppose, from a general business standpoint.
Right. Okay. That's very true. In fact, we can't escape it. We can't escape. There's this new technologies. They're very accessible. I mean, everywhere you go, you have gadgets, you have access. It's ubiquitous, right?
Right.
Now, but that's where the intervention, I think, of the elders, of the educators, of the parents. That's where it comes in.
Okay.
And it's very, very important. I mean, in the past, that I had the chance to promote e-learning.
Okay.
Okay, that was part of my advocacy before, to utilize the use of new technologies to further the learning process. It's going to be helpful for teachers and students, but there's this very big but. We were always prescribing that the intervention for education technologies start at a later age.
Okay.
Okay, at around maybe at the earliest, maybe at the 4th grade.
Okay. All right.
Right, because
So start with books.
start with the technology.
I see.
So
I
basically,
see.
what we're saying is, at the very young age, preschool, I mean, toddlers and stuff like that, no, as much as possible, no technologies first, no gadgets, no tablets, no nothing.
Okay.
Inundate them, expose them to books, make them love reading, because you cannot replace
Okay.
the love for learning. And then when they're big enough and they're mature enough, then of course you can slowly introduce them to the reality, which is, you can't naman keep your head, under the sand and say, it's technology is not happening. The real world has, it's all about technology now.
Right,
So,
right.
but again, we go back to the main concept of saying, don't start them out really young.
Okay.
Because they're, we all know this. The mind of a child is like a sponge.
Okay.
And, it absorbs anything very, very quickly.
Okay.
So, if they start them out right, with books and stuff like that, then that's what they absorb first, right?
Okay.
And then when they're big enough, they can make better decisions. At the time, you introduce them to all of these things, so tablets and gadgets and stuff like that, and the internet maybe.
Right.
Yeah.
That reminds me of a question I've heard last year from one of the budget hearings at the Senate. Senator Gatchalian was asking, in general terms, what is the future of books? And you just mentioned e-learning.
Yeah.
Right. Is there a future for the old print and paper books, or are we going to see that disappear now in favor of something you read from a gadget or maybe from software? What are your observations on the trends?
Well, you know what? These warning signs have been bandied about since 10, even 15 years ago.
Okay.
The advent of the tablets, and
Right.
you have all of these reading gadgets like Amazon's Kindle and whatnot,
Yeah.
right? So the whole world was saying, okay, this is the death knell, the death knell for the printed page.
Right.
But up to now, printed books still outsell the digital versions. What does that tell us? It tells us that there is a market for actual printed books.
Right. Is that true
Yeah.
for all categories of books? Because I've read somewhere that, I think it was UK, that children's books were the one that were bringing in the ones that were bringing in the sales for the publishing industry. And I suppose that makes sense, right? Because if you have young children, looking at my own child, they like to write on their books, they like to play with it, toss it around. I mean, I would be horrified if they did that, a child did that with my tablet or with my cell phone, right? So better with paper. But is that something that, is it true for certain kinds of books and less for others, you think?
Well, I don't have figures with me
Okay.
right now. All I know is that the printed books are doing very well.
Okay.
It has defied the dire projections that
Right.
were hoisted upon it from way back.
Yeah.
So when they said, okay, the e-books are here,
Yeah.
out with the printed ones, but it
Yeah.
didn't happen. It's
Yeah.
still the printed books are doing good at this moment.
Right.
Although having said that, the share of printed and e-books, they're kind of almost there.
Okay.
Okay. There's a real market for e-books. I mean, I read e-books.
Right.
Okay.
I
But
can't read ebooks. I mean, I read physical books. I read books on audio. I just can't seem to get myself to read the books on tablet.
Yeah, what I do read are like summaries.
Okay.
No, but when I wanna do a deep dive into something, I really get the printed book.
Now we have to take a quick break, but maybe
Okay.
a quick answer before we go. Would you agree or disagree with the observation that the Filipino culture is not a reading culture?
I will tend to disagree with that.
I think I tend to agree with that as well. We'll be right back with Mr. Policarpio. This is Business and Politics. Please stay tuned.
Rescue ng 10 katao matapos sumiklab ang
Sa pagsuko kahapon ng tatlong miyembro ng CPP-NPA
Welcome back to Business and Politics. We're talking to Mr. Policarpio of PEPA and BDAP.
Yeah.
You said before the break that the Filipinos are reading culture, right?
Right.
And I would agree with that. But where do you think the problem is? Because I'm coming from a newspaper's publisher's perspective here, right? And I know newspapers are encountering this problem of declining readership. And there are, of course, many problems, but one of them is that newspapers are expensive. And I was wondering if books are the same, right? And if that explains why we have a lower volume of printed, output in the Philippines compared to, say, Indonesia and others in the region. But if you look at newspapers, 25 pesos, and if you're, equating that, for example, with extreme poverty, that's 20% of your income right there. Who would buy newspapers, right? Of course, there's the internet, but if they can't afford to buy newspapers, how can they afford to buy a gadget where they can read the newspapers?
Yeah.
But do you think there's something similar going on in the book publishing industry here that keeps people from, I suppose, buying more books?
Well, yeah, I guess it's all boils down again to economics.
Okay.
Right, it's really all about economics, I mean, in the hierarchy of values,
Right.
of course, you have to buy your food first. And
Right.
although in the Philippines, there's an anomaly,
Right.
The top consumer item that the Filipinos are buying is not food or clothing or shelter.
Right.
It's load. So,
when I travel, this upsets
Yeah.
my wife a bit, but
Yeah.
when I travel, I relish the opportunity to buy books
Yes.
at airports abroad,
Right.
or anywhere abroad, because they tend to be much cheaper than the ones I find here. And I guess this is similar to what I was asking you earlier. I mean, I think the urge is there, right, to buy, but number one, it's expensive in
It
the
is.
Philippines, and then I feel that there are a lot of good titles published locally, but they're so hard to find. They're available perhaps in some specialty bookstores,
Yeah.
but not widely available in, say, in my corner national bookstore or whatnot, right? Is that are you seeing something similar, or is it just me?
Well, your observation is correct,
Okay.
Klink, in that regard. Of course, the publishers, trade publishers and everyone else in between, they want to have their books out there,
Right.
obviously, and but then again, it becomes a matter of economics, or feasibility, right? So you have a smattering of bookstores.
Right.
Physical brick and mortar bookstores,
Right.
and they can only take so much. So what do you do, right? So, if I'm a Filipino publisher, I would obviously want my books to be displayed there, right?
Right.
But of course, the bookstore will say, hey, I'd rather go with these foreign books because they're tried and tested, they're
Right.
popular, and so on and so forth.
right.
So it's really an all-around challenge, no?
Okay.
But then again, having said that, a bright spot is now, online purchases.
Okay.
So the publishers now make use of online promotions, and you can order directly from them
remember
online.
Lazada and Shopee were.
Yes.
I think BDAP was that.
Yes,
BDAP's initiative.
right. We do online book fairs now, especially during the pandemic.
Has
And
that paid off? I mean,
It did.
Okay.
It was very. We were pleasantly surprised. We did very well.
okay.
So again, it becomes an issue of access.
Okay.
So it's where we are, and it's what's keeping the Filipino publishers alive and going.
Okay.
Thank God for them. They don't give up easily.
Right,
And then
right.
there's still a lot of this true blue, publishers who keep on churning good books and
Right.
stuff, regardless of what, And maybe it's not common knowledge, but if your book sells 500 copies, then that's considered a
Bestseller.
bestseller already. Right? So.
Pretty low bar. Huh?
Exactly. But hey, for the love of it, the publishers continue to do that. And I think, I mean, well, I don't want to preempt your questions, but that's an area where government and the regulatory agencies can really give full support to.
Right.
We don't have a lack of creative minds, and people who want to put in the work and stuff. But really, it's the economics that's kind of bogging them down.
Right.
So I might be digressing, but to answer your question, it's really about economics.
Okay.
It's
okay.
business. It's business. I mean, if you take a look at the publishing industry now, I mean, it's like you'd be crazy to go into it. I mean, high cost of paper, high cost of printing equipment, and everything else. And then you go around, then you cost of distribution and promotion, and without even saying, mentioning the royalties you have to pay to your authors and stuff. So it's a whole, integrated.
How is the sector structured? Because there are two broad categories of books, right? There are the trade books, which are the fiction, nonfiction, the things that we like to read for our leisure, and then there are the textbooks. Right, that are meant for schools, for educational purposes. Are there publishers that focus exclusively on one category, or to achieve that economic scale that you're talking about, do they tend to do both, or do they have to do both, or what is the general arrangement or organization for publishers?
Well, yeah, you said it correctly. There's two general categories: trade books and textbooks or educational resources, materials. Now, the trade books, they try to get into the school market.
Okay.
By way of, encouraging the schools to say, okay, these are supplementary reading materials.
Okay.
Our books are very good materials for you to require your students to read them, or put them on your library so the students can have access to them, right? So because obviously the school market is is a viable market.
Okay.
Right? So you need
They're institutional buyers.
They're institutional buyers, and and even the libraries as well. So that's the thrust of even the trade publishers, trade book publishers. Now, for obvious reasons, the textbooks naman, they say, okay, that's really what they're after. I mean, they create textbooks, so they serve the schools, both public and private.
Right.
And if you do it correctly, there's volume there.
Right.
So it makes more sense in a way, from a business sense. It makes more sense to.
It can sustain.
The business, And then some of the educational publishers, they can do on the side naman.
Right.
Trade naman, but their main bread and butter will be the textbooks, of course.
I see.
Yeah.
Now, one of the let me just bring up a sensitive issue here. One of the issues that has been hounding the textbooks, of course, are the errors, right? But this has not been a new issue. I mean, but that's, I think, made worse during the pandemic.
Yeah.
Could you talk about that? I mean, why does that happen, and how does that relate to what we're talking about? Because what we're talking about really is trying to promote reading, right? And then quality, of course, has to come into it.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, consumers will look for something that is of quality, right?
Right. Well, let me try to dissect, your
right. I know it's a complicated
your question.
Yeah.
But let me try to focus on what I'm more familiar with.
Okay.
And which is the educational side, which is of publishing. And during the pandemic, well, let me begin by saying it was all very well intentioned. The government wanted to address the issue of providing.
Modules.
Educational resources in general to the public, to the students, right? Now, but how did they do that? They wanted to, come up with more easily readable or better, easily produced materials, no? So what they did was, maybe as a stopgap measure,
Okay.
they requested, some of the teachers to create their own modules, learning
Okay.
modules. Well, the teachers naman obviously are subject matter experts.
Right.
So they have, in a way, they have a right to do that. But
Okay.
creating a book is totally different discipline,
That's right.
right? So that's where we are, no? That's what happened.
Could you go into, because I heard some of your colleagues talk about the long process before a book really becomes available, the research,
Yes.
the editing,
Yes.
all of the could you talk about how many years does it take to, I mean, in particular textbooks, because that's, I think, very sensitive, right, to
Yes,
have it
yes,
correct.
Yes. Well, if you do it, if you focus on it, I think we could do a book maybe in 12 months.
That quick.
Yeah, if you
Because
focus on
I've
it.
heard years for some.
Yeah, in reality,
Right.
it can drag on because all of these things. There's delays in the submission of the manuscripts and stuff like that. But I'm saying, all else being equal, you could actually come up with a good book.
Okay.
And that should be the case because education is always is very dynamic. You can't
Okay.
naman
Right.
come up with the book, like 3 years from now and say it's still valid.
Right.
And the world has passed you by, right? So, in an ideal situation, you can actually create a book
Okay.
in 12 months. And that includes a lot of research. You have subject matter experts doing it. You have instructional designers who can, lay out and present the lessons in a very conducive manner.
Okay.
Because you can't just put in and throw in the topics haphazardly.
Right, right.
There's a progression to it.
Right.
And the experts in learning and the curriculum, they're the ones who were supposed to do that.
Right.
Right? And they have the learner in mind when they design the book.
Right.
So when it's all done, then you throw in the book design itself.
Okay.
The graphics and, how many pages. And, you also have to consider that because you only have a limited time in a year, in a school year. So
Okay.
you have to make sure that your pages are just the right amount so they'll be, utilized for the whole year.
Wow. Okay. So
There's a lot of considerations, and I don't think
know. I think
we'd be able to.
It was an unfair question because it's such a complicated topic.
I know,
But
I
think we summarize it and say it takes a while.
It takes a while. It does take a while. I mean, if you want a quality book.
Right.
But obviously, if you want to come up with something, haphazardly, is put it together.
That's where you get the errors then.
Copy and paste, and you rush things just to come up with the book in time for a deadline, and that's where the problems come in.
All right. We'll be right back with Mr. Toots Policarpio. This is Business Politics. Please stay tuned.
Did you know that water is the only drink that can quench your thirst? Drink Galilee Purified Drinking Water. Every bottle undergoes advanced scientific process to ensure safe, clean, and pure bottle. So what are you waiting for? Drink Galilee Drinking Water. Every bottle is a labor of love. For delivery, contact Galilee Purified Drinking Water at 0956 658 4195 or 0998 466 0202 or 8572 1869.
Welcome back to Business and Politics. Toots, we're talking about the quality of books, Right, but I think the presumption here is that there are companies that will print them, right? How's the book publishing sector so far? I mean, how did they fare the pandemic, and how are they recovering? Are they recovering, or what's the status?
Well, I think it's safe to say that the publishing industry is on its way to recovery.
Okay.
I mean, of course, it got hit very, very much by the pandemic, but it's on its way to recovery now. I mean, of course, the schools are opening up. They're back to using their, textbooks again, and there's some very positive directions emanating from the Department of Education on the procurement side and the provision side, and all of these things are happening, and there's a lot of reason to be optimistic.
Okay.
Right. So I mean, the publishing houses have started to go out again, and
right.
I mean, the schools are ordering again. So,
is it correct to say that this is the publishing falls under the manufacturing cluster? I mean, is book publishing a manufacturing process? I mean, I'm only asking because in terms of job creation, manufacturing seems to generate the most number of jobs, and I was wondering if that is the case also for book publishing.
Well, in a very general sense, it is.
Okay.
Of course, you're manufacturing something, but if you really wanna define it or describe it, it will fall under the creatives.
Okay. All right.
Under the creative industries, right? Because I mean, there's a lot of intellectual property here. There's a lot of mind work. You know, I mean, all of this content creation and stuff like that. So that's really the core,
right,
of the publishing industry.
So you said you're optimistic. Are companies hiring now? Did they let go of people during the pandemic, and are they bringing those people back now, or what's happening?
Well, the general sense is that yes, it's the publishing companies are hiring. Obviously, they had to let go of people during the pandemic.
Right.
That's a given.
Okay.
But I think they're hiring back. I mean, I can see ads now. Recruiting and all. But then again, the pandemic has also taught the publishing companies a lot of lessons.
Okay.
Right? So now they've realized they can do hybrid work, and that's going to be more cost efficient, no?
Right.
I mean, most of the work that used to be done in the company's premises can now be done outside, work from home setup and stuff like that.
Right.
So mostly on the writing and the designing and stuff like that. So most of it are now being done. So there's this new dynamic in the workplace. But the bottom line is, it's working again. It's
okay. That's good. But in our case, newspaper publishers, we also do some type of hybrid. But of course, those involved in the printing, they cannot print the paper remotely. They have to be physically present, right? So how is that impacting the future arrangements? Because you can only do hybrid so much, right?
Yeah.
But I've also heard that some publishers, I think even before the pandemic, have outsourced their printing to either their competitors. They're focusing mainly on the development of books, but they're outsourcing the printing to someone else, or maybe overseas. How much of that is going on?
Well, let me begin by saying publishing and printing are two distinct activities. Okay. There are those, the bigger ones at least, who do both publishing and printing.
Right.
They have printing facilities, they own printing facilities.
Right.
And that's all very well, and they can compete in a very high level.
Right.
Because they can control the costs and everything else, right? But there's also this group of publishers who don't print their own.
Okay.
They contract it out. The printing side, they contract it out. I mean, they talk to printers,
Right.
both local and foreign,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
we were talking about that earlier.
Yeah,
You were
yeah.
saying that some of the jobs, the printing jobs, actually go to our neighbors, in Indonesia, for instance.
That is true. That is true.
So
Because
we lose out jobs because of that.
yes, obviously.
Okay.
Obviously, because I mean, the way we're set up, the way we're structured, I mean, cost of paper is very expensive, very high. I mean, and it's very unstable at this point. And then, of course, the quality of the printing and all else being considered. And then when you have an option like maybe print it out from, say, Indonesia or, say, Hong Kong before was
China,
a popular, or
yeah.
China even,
Yeah.
then, I mean, for some reason, it becomes more cost effective
Right.
for the publishers to do that. So they farm out the printing services, and when the products, they come in as books already,
Right.
finished products, then they get entitled to a lot of these benefits and
Right.
tax incentives and
Right.
stuff like that. Because, I mean, textbooks are not taxed,
Right.
So
But
it makes it more attractive for them to do that.
Right. But is there an argument that can be made to encourage more printing jobs to be done here? Of course, number one, there'll be more jobs. But what needs to happen? I mean, or can the industry be competitive and maybe rival the quality, the price that we find maybe in outsourcing these jobs abroad?
Yes. Well, the quick answer to your question, Clink, is yes.
Okay.
But it needs a lot of government intervention and
Okay.
support.
Okay.
And because, again, well, there's several factors. Globalization,
Right.
supply issues, and everything else, right? So it becomes an issue of scale.
Okay.
For you to be able to get the benefits of volume and scale, then you need to do bigger and bigger and
Right.
bigger.
So
right?
you may get a bestseller printing a 500 copies, right? But
Right.
that's not going to
That's not gonna move the needle.
Yeah.
It's not gonna move the needle.
Right.
So that has always been an issue among publishers.
Okay.
Paper is one. It's a perennial issue. I mean, the supply
Same
and the
problems
cost of
with,
paper.
newspapers,
yeah. And it's gonna take a different set of discussion to discuss the printing concerns, man. But yeah.
But is it something that deserves attention from the government? I mean, I would think that the payoff is more jobs, right? You say that it's really more appropriate to put it in the creatives box. I'm thinking more of the manufacturing box. But at the end of the day, it's still more jobs, right?
Right.
So is that enough to argue for more support for I mean, how critical is the book publishing industry to our economy?
It is very critical.
Okay.
The publishing industry deserves every bit of support.
Okay.
The same way the other industries are being, are enjoying now. No.
Okay.
And of course, there's a lot of initiatives towards
Okay.
that end. I'm
Okay.
not saying it's being neglected, but
Okay.
the sense is, I mean, we could do a lot more.
Right.
We could do a lot more, and I don't want to quote. Bills or proposed bills
Right.
at this point. But I do know there's several measures, geared towards that end to support the creative industries, to support the supply of of paper and printing.
Right.
In a nutshell, on the paper issue, if we can only get government to consolidate all of these demands, because that's not too difficult to do, to forecast, right?
Right.
And then make sure the supply is there, the quality is there, and drive down the prices a little bit to make it more feasible for the publisher. Then I think overall the contribution to the economy from the publishing industry would be felt. Would be
Right.
really be felt.
Hey,
Yeah.
how is it in the book publishing industry? Because I know in newspaper publishing, the amount that we devote to raw materials, paper in particular, is quite high. And in before the pandemic, it would even rival the the cost of, say, maybe wages and salaries. But
Yeah.
how is it in book publishing?
Well, I don't have the exact figures at this point because, companies have different cost structures, right? But I would say, paper takes
Substantial.
up substantial, in the value chain.
Right.
Yes.
That's interesting. Well, we'll be right back with Mr. Tus Policarpio. This is Business and Politics. We're talking about books and reading in the Philippines.
We don't need to explain because truth needs no justification. We are not afraid because the truth will always win. When we ask questions, it's always for the good of all. We question to build, not to break. We question to clarify, not to confuse. We question to protect, not hurt. Truth hurts, but it heals. Tune in to SMNI, where truth is free. SMNI, defining true press freedom.
Back to Business and Politics. We're talking to Mr. Tus Policarpio. Tus, you said earlier that, this is an important sector. It deserves help.
Yeah.
Well, we have not a new government, but they've been in office for 6 months. We're of course starting a new year, 2023. What would you like for government to look at that would be beneficial to the book publishing sector?
Okay. Well,
Again, I'm sorry. It's a loaded question. But maybe you can rifle off some of the priorities here.
Okay. Off the top of my head, I can say, well, number one, the Department of Education is the single biggest customer, as it were, no, or user of published books, right?
Okay.
So both educational and trade. Now, we would like government to continue and implementing that RA 8047 law.
Which is the law creating
creating
National Book Development
creating
Board.
the National Book Development
Which
Board.
I chair, yeah.
Yes, of course. And at the core of it is that, the publishers should be the ones to provide, the private publishers should be the ones to provide the textbooks and supplementary materials to the Department of Education. Okay? So that should be implemented all throughout because, there's a lot of incentives for publishers to continue doing business if that is secure.
Okay.
That's one. Now,
so could you say that could you say that if you do that, then you are not only supporting a particular sector, but you're also helping generate jobs?
Of course.
Is it fair to say it like that?
Of course.
Okay.
Of course. I don't
want to put words in your mouth, but
yes, but the benefits, there's a multiplier effect to that law.
Okay.
Because it's gonna continue, providing jobs for the publishing houses and all of its, allied industries, right?
Okay.
So that's one. Now, on the creative side, we would want government, and then maybe through the National Book Development Board, to come up with grants to support the creative efforts of the people,
Okay.
like authors. I mean, you can encourage them to
Yeah.
create quality books without, I mean, how do you call this? For them having to worry about, where to get their food or stuff like that. If you get a grant, then all they can focus on is to create quality
Okay.
materials.
Right. Let me play a little devil's advocate here, because there have been many grants. There are many grants that the NBDB offers. One of the problems that I encountered when I first set foot in the office was there were a number of manuscripts that were, of course, commissioned by the National Book Development Board. But there is a problem now with looking for publishers to publish them. I mean, I've only been with that agency for a few years, but is there maybe a way that the publishers can work with NBDB and maybe create a market for these books? Because I feel it's a waste. They're ready manuscripts, and yet there are of course funded by an NBDB grant, but no takers to commercialialize.
To be very frank with you, I am not aware of any of that.
Yeah.
That's why I don't want to comment on it.
Yeah.
But the general sense that I have is that, I mean, if the publishers are being given all of these things, they're
Okay.
given elbow room to create
Okay.
quality material, then I'm
Okay.
sure they'll pick it up.
Okay.
And and maybe another issue there will be, of course, not in this forum, but other issue there is, if the NBDB gives you a grant
Right.
and you create the manuscripts, to whom does the copyright belong?
That's another one. But
That's another one, right?
Yeah.
So maybe those are the small things that we need to flesh out.
yeah.
But generally, I think, grants, creative development grants are always very welcome.
Yeah, and this is somewhat related to that, and we were talking about this earlier, that there are some incentives already available,
Yeah.
but there are few takers. For instance, the NBDB gives out these import duty exemptions for paper, for those printing educational materials, but not many publishers are taking up that incentive. The CREATE law that was passed last year,
Yeah.
I think you could count with one hand the number of publishers who applied for incentives under the CREATE law. Is there something wrong that can be refined so that more publishers could maybe enjoy these existing benefits and incentives?
Well,
Or what's wrong? What have you encountered? I mean, red tape? Is it red tape? Is it?
it could be
Something
several.
else,
It
yeah.
could be several things.
Okay.
I mean, because it's not logical. That there's an incentive and nobody
Yeah.
avails of it, right?
Yeah.
So maybe what we could do is to maybe go through the details. No,
Right.
maybe the requirements are a little too stiff. And then maybe there's some unintended consequences
Okay.
for availment. No, so.
Okay.
And these are things that we probably would be worth our while, to
Okay.
take a look at.
Yeah, because the government
Yeah.
looked at the ease of doing business, right?
Right,
I mean, but
right.
is there anything in particular regarding that would be, most beneficial to publishers? Is there something recurring that you've heard of a business problem that you've heard of that maybe you'd like government to look into it?
Well, we haven't gone a deep dive into
Okay.
on these particular policies, but I do agree with you. We could use more takers of those incentives. No?
Right,
So
right.
maybe what we can do is to take a closer look
Right.
and see. Because it defies logic. No,
Yeah.
if it's beneficial for them, then they should avail of it.
Right.
So maybe when some of them tried, and maybe they found a few things here and there, and that's what we would want to find out. So we
Right,
can
right.
tweak it.
Right.
So we can tweak it.
Right. You mentioned also the Department of Education as a important institutional buyer, the biggest customer, as you said. But how about the effort to sell to local governments? Now they have the Mandanas ruling, right? I think you were saying something that there are some facilities already there. But have you had a chance, maybe through BDAP or TUPEPA, to talk to some particular LGUs and say, look, buy more books from us instead of building that covered court or that or that waiting shed, right? I mean, maybe this is a better investment of your windfall.
Yeah, well, I mean, most of the structure is in place already.
Okay.
And most of the publishing houses, they actually try and serve the LGUs.
Okay.
If they can't serve from DepEd Central,
right,
then there's always the LGUs, no? They have their own specific school divisions, right? To serve. And that has been a common practice now.
Yeah, because one of the problems I heard in the past was that, there are two competing, goals, right? There was one goal to consolidate all the purchases at DepEd so that you lower the unit cost. You're trying to achieve economies of scale.
Right.
Except that, by doing that, then you edge out all of the smaller publishers now because they cannot comply with the volume.
Yes.
But I think an encouraging development now is that DepEd will look at regional purchases, which is I think a positive development.
It is a positive.
It'll be good for the small publishers, especially in the regions. But what else? Where else can be can we look at to maybe help you sell more books? I think that's the bottom line, right?
Yeah.
And if you sell more books, we have more Filipinos reading. We create more jobs. Overall, I think the rewards are fantastic.
Yeah, I'm sure of that. So not only in textbook, but libraries as well.
Okay.
Libraries, to encourage the LGUs down to the barangay level, if possible, to have library centers. That way, the multiplier effect of that is really overwhelming in a sense. So imagine if you have libraries, you mandate it that all barangays should have like what you're doing, a book nook, a library, and then you stock it up with books, and then you set aside a budget for it, and it all goes around.
Well, I know the answer to this, but I'd like to hear it from you. What's the argument for buying more Philippine books? I mean, because there are many books that deserve to be read, that comes from all over the world, right? Well, why should we read Philippine books?
Well,
I mean, when we go to the libraries, when we talk to DepEd and the other important buyers, what's the case for the Philippine books? Why should we read it?
Well, for one, Filipino published books are really good.
Okay.
That's one. That's basic. I mean, no protectionism here or anything. They're basically.
You're not biased or anything like that.
No. It's basically good. I mean, but we need to encourage. And again, it's also global economics now because you can't naman shut out the foreign titles.
Right.
So what you need to do is to step up your game.
Right.
And come up with quality material because that's the only viable argument,
Right.
But having said that, it won't hurt. It won't hurt if government has a policy to say, okay, all libraries should have X% Filipiniana books.
Okay.
To jumpstart, to help the industry, you know what I mean?
The government does have the Magna Carta for MSMEs, and I think most people forget. Well, they only talk about the access to capital, right? You devote 10% to SMEs, but most people forget that other provision there, that it requires all government agencies to set aside 10% of their procurement budgets for MSMEs. And I would think that a lot of publishers would qualify for that.
Yes. Okay, so these are things, we can utilize, And another thing that comes to mind, I don't know, I might be dating ourselves here, Klink, Remember back in the day when government was promoting original Filipino music?
Oh yes.
OPM?
Yes.
There was a law that required the radio stations to play.
I didn't know that.
To play OPM.
Okay.
OPM, at least X number of songs within an hour.
Yeah, I must be from a younger generation.
Oh my goodness.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah. See, and that helped the Filipino music industry a lot. That was the golden age of original Filipino music.
Yeah, but that's I think something
in the same concept. In the same context, if you do something like that for Filipino books,
Yeah.
then
I was going to say that, we see something similar like that for movies, right? Where you
Right.
have the Manila Film Festival, where you're pretty much forced to see a Philippine movie if you want to go to cinemas, right?
Right.
But I think at the end of the day, you need to have a good product. Do you think the publishers are ready to compete? I mean, you said that the books are good.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. I will answer that with a resounding yes. The
Okay.
Filipino publishers are ready. They're good.
And
They're good.
one other, probably this is in support of that. One of the interesting things that I've noticed ever since I joined the NBDB, you have these Filipino works that are now actually making, having success in the overseas market.
Right.
Traced, illustrated novels,
Right.
things like that.
Right.
But is there a mindset among publishers to think of books as an export product, or are you really just focused on selling locally?
Well, it's every publisher's dream to break into the global market.
Okay.
That's that's a
Okay.
given, and we have a few breakthroughs, no, and that should be more of the case rather than the exception.
Right.
So we continue churning out good quality material, hoping that it becomes mainstream already, just like
Okay.
with other industries, So it's a process, it's a journey, but
Right.
that's the dream
Right.
of the Filipino publisher.
Well, I hope in 2023 we'll see some realization of that dream.
Oh yeah.
Toots, I'm really thankful for the time you gave to Business and Politics today. But maybe before we go, maybe you'd like to leave a message or maybe some thoughts. The screen is yours. Maybe to give a shout out to whomever, maybe to government about what you need.
Oh well, what can I say? Well, the Philippine publishing industry is alive and well,
Okay.
but it needs a lot of help.
Okay.
Needs a lot of help, and this is probably my own plea to government and the private sector as well to support and continue supporting Filipino published books.
Okay.
Think Filipino first. Filipino first. It doesn't mean that we'll be shutting ourselves off from the world, but let's mahalin natin ang ating sariling akda. Maraming salamat po.
Well, thank you, Toots. I'd like to thank also our viewers watching this program live and watching the replay. I'd like to add my own recommendation for people to read Philippine books. Read to your children. Read with your family. I think it can be a nice family activity together. I'd like to thank also Pastor Apollo Kibuloy for making this program possible. This is Business and Politics, and I'll see you next week.